Good morning. Let me also begin, and I wish all of our moms happy Mother's Day today as we are gathered. Thank you so much for being here. What a beautiful time we've already shared together this morning. I want to talk today, I want to kind of take you back into my own journey where, trying to think a lot over the last few years, especially as we kind of get to this stage of my life, and you try to think back like what were the real shaping events and what were the things that were super helpful to me? Where are the places I still want to grow, vision I still have? And all of us wake up every day and we have some vision for what the world could be like, should be like, what we bring to the world. We all have some foundation upon which we build our lives upon. And part of what I want for us to do is to begin to get a vision that's worth our lives, worth giving of ourselves in every way that we possibly can. And this idea is the idea of shalom, which is what we talk about a lot around here. It's the word is translated to peace, but it means more than that. And the way I would define shalom is this, that shalom is where everything is rightly related to everything else. It's this way for us to be able to live and to be and to become in a world where everything is rightly related to everything else. And this is what God longs to do, to return things to this way for us. And so that's kind of where I want for us to go and where I want for us to get to. And this requires something from you, requires something of you, requires a way for you to build your life upon. So I want to kind of begin, I was thinking back, because it's Mother's Day, and my mom was a very instrumental part of my life. My mom passed away just a couple of years ago, about a year and a half ago. Toward the end of her life, she struggled with Alzheimer's, and it was, as you can imagine, just a really tough deal. My mom, I have two brothers, an older brother who's, so I'm not a behemoth of a man, right? I'm a normal sized guy. My younger brother is a normal sized guy. My older brother is significantly bigger than both of us. He's like 6'3", he's a big guy. And the reason that matters is because my dad was 5'6" and my mom was 4'11". So it just looked like completely out of place. So my mom says there's three kind of boys in her house that are rambunctious and crazy, and she's this little kind of firecracker. And there were so many places where my mom, just her steady faithfulness. I remember some of my earliest memories are just as a teenager walking by her bedroom in the morning on the way to the kitchen. I would see her in there through the crack of her door with her Bible open. I mean, every single day. She just what she did. And I think a lot of maybe some of the ways that I began to kind of read the Bible were encouraged by her, just the consistency over her life, just reading and processing and just consistently over time. But there's one thing that I remember profoundly as I look back has shaped me maybe more than anything else. So many of you know my affinity for 80s music, which I still have. My taste have refined a little bit. But back in the heyday of the 80s, 84, 85, 86, 87, which is a great time to be alive, by the way. But I love the hair bands, and Motley Crue was one of my favorite bands. Now, some of you have no idea who Motley Crue is. It's trash, heavy metal, hair band music. And it's about all the things that you think it's about. And so I really liked Motley Crue, and I wanted to go see Motley Crue, but I knew that my mom would not want me to go see Motley Crue. So I concocted a plan. I was about around my 17th birthday, and I got a friend of mine to give me tickets for my birthday, and I would pay them separately, kind of this little quid pro quo kind of thing. And so my argument was, I'd go home and say, Mom, I'm going to Motley Crue, and they were given to me as a gift, and I know because you have raised me well, you would not want me to reject a gift that someone gave to me, right? So this is, you know where I'm going with this? Y'all have done this before to your parents. And so I had this whole thing planned out. So I get home, I remember we were standing in the laundry room as soon as we walk in my house, and I'm standing there and she's I think I was washing my clothes. My mom, I didn't know your parents were supposed to wash your clothes. Ever since I was a kid, she said, wash your clothes, it's okay. And so as we're standing there and I'm trying to figure out how to bring this up, I said, Mom, I'm gonna go see Motley Crue. And she just looked at me, looked at me. And I said, they were giving me as a gift, so I really don't think I can turn them down. So I think I'm gonna go. And she didn't there's no argument, there was nothing. She just said, well, you just do what you think God wants you to do. I was like, what kind of Jedi mind trick is this, man? Because what just happened to me? But here's what happened to me. And I didn't know it at the time, I had to go back and look in the mirror and decide what kind of person am I going to be? Right, like that's dramatic, but that's what I had to decide, because I could pretend that I didn't know what I should or shouldn't do at 17 years old. I could pretend that, no, it really doesn't affect me, but the reality is I did know. I did know those things. And I tried everything to pretend that I didn't know them. It was about 2 or 3 days of like, what is wrong with me? I'm 17 years old. This should not be this big of a decision. All of my friends are going. It was just all the things. And just so you know, I sold the tickets. I didn't go. But my point is that it began to establish a level of foundation that I had to learn to live my life upon. And this is really the reality for all of you. We all have reasons and excuses of why we do or don't do certain things, of why we haven't done or don't, why things have worked out or haven't. We all have those things, but the bottom line is at some point you have to know where you are and where you are prone to play games and where you are prone to make excuses and where all these things, the things that you say, well, I just really didn't know if I'd know more, and you know that that's not actually true. And I want to take you back to some of my early journey of how this began to get sort of forged and formed into my own life. Last week we talked about having peace with God, and the big statement was this, that until you have peace with God, you will not find peace with anything else. Until you are rightly related with God, that you will not find other things to find meaning and purpose. You will not be rightly related with anything else. We're gonna make idols out of our work, and we're gonna make resumes out of our family. All these things we're gonna do until we find peace with God. And the second part of this is what I want for us today is to learn to find peace within. That there's a peace that you can have with yourself. The first relationship that gets reconciled is our relationship with God. And the second one that needs to be reconciled is our relationship with ourselves. For you to actually have a foundation for which you can build your life up and live from. We've been saying this foundation is God's love for us. That somehow there's this source of his image and who he is that has been given to us, and we receive this, trust this, and learn to live from it. The two big statements, again, God's love is the only sufficient foundation, the only sufficient source, for human relationships. It's the only source that we can exchange, where we can actually learn to live rightly related to one another. And this means we have to receive this for ourselves. We have to have it within us in order to be rightly related to God, to be rightly related with ourselves, to have a sense of self, a sense of character, from which we can bring this to other people around us. And then the next statement is that God's love is the only sufficient foundation for the fullness of human expression. We're gonna talk more about that in a few weeks. And the funny thing about love, or the difficult thing about love, and I'm not gonna draw my chart again because we don't have time, but what I want you to understand is this is why we struggle so deeply with this, because to live in this way, to live with this rule of love, to live in this kind of relationship, it requires us to trust. To trust. We have to learn to trust God. We have to learn to trust ourselves. To trust ourselves. To make decisions about things and say, I believe that I'm doing this and this decision is right or correct or in line. We have to be able to do it with a sense of authenticity and a depth of character. And this is unbelievably good news for us because it actually can happen. But it is unbelievably hard because it requires a tremendous amount of attention. It requires us to take some things seriously that it's easy not to. And so I want to look at a couple of places. I want to look at Psalm 51, then I want to look back in the back of your Bibles in James chapter 1. This is one of the first verses that I memorized as a high school, college student, and really began to kind of meditate on it. And I'm reading this out of the New American Standard Version, which was that was the version that I had when I was in late high school and college. For those of you who wonder, I mostly read out of the New International Version now, but that's neither here nor there. But the reason is because the word says this, it says, behold, you desire truth in my innermost being. We're gonna see this in just a moment. You desire truth in the innermost being of who I am. I remember that phrase just struck me as a kid, that somehow God wanted something from me. And when you begin to look at the sort of surrounding context, and we'll look at this together, starting in like verse 1 or 2, 3, I'm not sure where this is, but it says this is how it starts off. Be gracious to me, O God, according to your loving kindness. According to the greatness of your compassion, blot out my transgressions, wash me thoroughly from my iniquity, and cleanse me from my sin. For I know that my transgression is ever before me. This passage just opens up with the psalmist. It's David actually writing after he's been caught with Bathsheba and Uriah and that whole story, if you're familiar with that. So this is a devastating circumstance. His sin has created havoc in all the relationships that matter to him. It's ruined his reputation. And so he's like, this is always before me, it's never going away. Lord, if there's any way according to your graciousness, could you not kill me? And then he goes on, he says, against you and you only have I sinned and done what is evil in your sight. So you're justified when you speak, right? You're right in accusing me and condemning me. And you're blameless when you judge me, right? I deserve what you're saying. And then he kind of adds this, behold, look, see, I was born into this sin condition. That's what he's acknowledging. He's not saying his mom did anything wrong. It would be terrible on Mother's Day. He's just saying that in sin my mother conceived me. I just entered into this world in this way. And then he says, behold, you desire truth in the innermost being. And now it's getting down to the place that very few of us are willing to look carefully at. The places where we have wants and desires, disappointments. The places where sometimes the things that we want are contrary to what God wants. They're just flat selfish because we just deserve them. Has anybody ever felt like that? You just want something because you want it and you feel like you deserve it, just me? Like it happens to us. We feel this way. And what he's saying is we desire truth in our innermost being. And in the hidden parts of us, you will make me know wisdom. And so there's these two things. And what happened to me is I began to just wrestle with this whole idea over those sort of formative years of my life and kind of learning to build my faith. I began to learn to pay attention to the inner places of my own life, what I was thinking, what I was feeling, what was happening inside of me, these desires. And there was a lot of wrestling with shame and guilt and all the things that we all feel, but it's part of the process. And what I began to realize is that I could be honest with God, that he desires truth in the innermost places of my heart. He wanted me to be honest with him, and I could say things to God. I didn't have to pretend that I was a particular way. I could just say, God, here's where I'm at. Here's what I feel. Here's what I think. You know, you can kill me if you want, but this is the real deal. And I just learned to be honest with him, to wrestle through motives when they were impure, to wrestle through questions about decisions that I had to make, my own morality and my own choices in morality. What would I think about money? What I would think about sex? What I would think about marriage? I just began to wrestle with him through them. And I became unafraid to say things to God, to bring this. But what I began is also in that same vein, as long as I be honest with him, I'll also learn that when you're honest with God, you have to learn to take sin seriously. You have to learn that there's a lot of places in our lives, or at least I learned about myself, there's a lot of places in my life where I tend to justify or I tend to minimize things. And I just had to learn, if I'm gonna be honest with God, then he's gonna be honest with me. I have to learn to take sin seriously. And what I wanna say to you, the reason I think it's just so important for us to understand is this passage of truth in our innermost being and wisdom being made known or revealed in these hidden places or these deep places, is it's centered in a psalm about forgiveness. This is why forgiveness is the first step or the entry point into an eternal kind of life. And most of us, we go, yes, I get it, Jesus forgave me for my sins, but we don't really spend a lot of time really trying to wrestle with the implications of that forgiveness. And what you'll come to find out is when he says to be honest, or he desires truth in our innermost being, it's not just a call to be honest, although it is. What he desires in your innermost being is not just that you be honest, but that you would find a kind of truth that you can actually build your life upon and live your life from. There will be kind of a freedom that you can bring into the world around you that's authentic. It's to be a person of integrity and a person of character. And no one can do this for you. No one can do it for you. No other person can tend to your character and to your integrity. God says, I desire truth in the innermost places of who you are, and it is there I will give you a kind of integration, a wisdom that will cause you to become. And this whole vision of human flourishing, to be rightly related, to live in a way that brings something of beauty to the world around us, will not happen and is not available if we are not willing to become the kind of people to steward what is so unbelievably good. This is just the hard truth of this. Truth is not an intellectual concept by what you agree with or disagree with. Wisdom is not some sage advice. These are ideas, they're relationally driven. It's about reality and it's about integration. That's how wisdom and truth have been thought of, particularly in the ancient cultures. In fact, the thing that Jesus would say in the conclusion of the Sermon on the Mount, if you haven't read it, it's just a great thing to read. The very end, what Jesus says is, whoever hears my words and doesn't do what I say is like the man who builds their house or the woman who builds their house on the sand. You've heard this before. But whoever hears my words and does what I say is like the person who builds their house on the rock. When the storms come, one crumbles into the sea, the other stands. And it's always about what we hear and what we're willing to do about what we hear. Wisdom is not sage advice. It is about an integration of what you believe and this alignment of what we think and what we feel and how it moves in and through our lives. That's what wisdom is really about. It's an integration of this. It's integrity. And the foundation that we build upon is essential. If you build on a foundation that you can't trust or you don't trust, you'll be blown around, you'll be shaky, you'll be anxious. We'll do all sorts of things in an effort to find something to fill ourselves, to get people to make us feel the way we think we deserve to feel. We will do all sorts of things to control and manipulate and hold on, to try to pretend that we're not coming apart or that our foundation really isn't as shaky until we find something to build our lives upon. This is why we talked about last week, I think it's such a beautiful passage. Therefore, since we've been justified through faith, we have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ, through whom we have gained access by faith. So we've gained access into this grace by which we now stand. The grace is where your feet are. So I want to begin to give us a picture for this. Grace becomes the foundation for which we live and understand and learn how to live this out. And what I'm primarily talking about is what has been done for us, that we have been forgiven. Do you have a vision for what it means for you to be forgiven? Because this is a lot of times the problem that we face when it comes to our own disintegration and not being able to resolve things internally. We have to trust, and this is what we talked about last week, we have to trust that what Jesus has done is sufficient. We have to believe that we have indeed been made right with God. That's the key idea. So I'm gonna try to draw this out because a lot of us, we see forgiveness like this. Let's see if yellow will show up. Perfect. So we're this kind of person, and we're hanging out here and we hear about God's forgiveness. We're like, man, forgiveness is so good. I would love some of that. And so we come to him and we say, oh God, could you please give me some of your forgiveness? And then he doles it out. Boop, just like that. Maybe a little less than that, just like a little drop. Boop, boop, right, just enough for what you need. And we need big forgiveness. We feel like we need then big sorrow, big guilt, big whatever. So we approach God in this way. And we just have this fundamentally transactional view of forgiveness. That somehow it's something that, even to forgive someone else, it's something that we possess. We have the authority to forgive another person if they have wronged us. And when we give it to someone, we're just kind of letting them off the hook. And we really don't see it as a kind of justice. I mean, think about this, right? So many of us, right, to live in forgiveness requires you to be a kind of person. Most of us think of forgiveness like this, as like you did something, you were late, you played golf too long, you come home, your wife is ticked, you're like, I'm sorry, and she's not talking to you, I'm sorry, and then finally when you say you're sorry enough, and you're like, oh, I'm sorry, she's like, okay, you're like, whew, she's not mad at me anymore. And the way, or you can put your own scenario in there, but we all do this. It's like an apology theology where we're trying to extract this from someone, and then when we get it, we're like, whew, they're not mad at us anymore. Whew, we're off the hook. Whew, we don't have to deal with that guilt or have to navigate that anymore. And there's two ways. Do you know then how to live as someone who has been rightly related to another person, or do you just know how to take advantage of someone's grace? Do you know how to live in a rightly related, when someone forgives you, what they have done is they have restored you to trust. This is why so many people struggle with this, because there's trust is broken, forgiveness is given, and there's no trust restored, and there's no pattern or process for which trust is to be restored, and we don't learn how to live rightly related. The result of being forgiven isn't a clean slate, it is a right relationship. And the reason this is so important, because this is how a lot of us see it, so we're living out here, and the way I think about this is that to be forgiven is a different category. It is to learn to live. It would be like this, that for this place of grace is the place of forgiveness. And what we have to learn is we have to learn how to live, not by receiving forgiveness. We have to learn how that we've been transferred and moved into this grace in which we now stand. We live in forgiveness. It is a state. We live in forgiveness, and then we live out of that forgiveness as one who has been forgiven. Forgiven people trust and steward trust. This is why I'm talking about the inner place. You know how prone you are to take advantage of someone else's good graces to you. And I'm not saying this like to be judgmental. I'm just saying all of us do this. There are people and places and relationships that if I can get away with things, I'm going to get away with them. What stops you? What counters that? This is the kind of integrity, the kind of person that I'm talking about. There's something valuable that happens in forgiveness, and it is that we have been returned to trust. And what we do with that trust is exceedingly important. And this is why truth in our innermost being is so critical. You probably know where you were prone to play games. I was 17 years old. I knew the games I was playing with my parents. Some of you in here, you're 17, you're 16, you're 12. You know the games that you play. You like to pretend you don't, but you do. He desires truth in our innermost being, and you are not gonna find freedom until you learn that reality. So let's skip down to James. My dear brothers, take note of this. Everyone should be, this is a message in and of itself, but we're not even gonna talk about it. Should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. And this is what I want to focus on, because human anger does not do what? Produce the righteousness that God desires. The problem with most of us is that when we hear or read passages like this, one is we've already underlined, be quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to become angry. So we already have our nugget that we just read on past everything else. But the other part is that when we hear about something, this righteousness that God desires, we almost immediately think this is the kind of behavior that God expects of us. It is not what this word means. Human anger does not produce the reconciled relationships that God desires. It does not produce the rightness that God desires. That's what he's talking about. Therefore, get rid of all moral filth and the evil that is so prevalent, and humbly accept the word planted in you, which can save you. Again, we think, oh, okay, so which can save me? That means I get to go to heaven when I die. It's not what he's talking about. Do you see why I keep saying this over and over again? Because we keep reading the Bible like this. And what he's talking about here, he's not talking about like, God desires you to be well-behaved, so stop all the behaviors that are, he's not. He's saying there's something that God desires for us to be rightly related. And you have to get rid of anything that threatens that. All the indulgent things where we indulge ourselves and occupy ourselves and numb ourselves and entertain ourselves. If we want to become the kind of people for whom these other things are possible, we've got to learn how to get rid of those things and begin to receive or trust or accept the message that's been planted in us, which is a message of reconciliation, of forgiveness. One of the things you'll find about James is a great book. It's like James is super influenced by both the Sermon on the Mount and Proverbs. So it's just like bullet points. If you like Cliff's Notes to a lot of the complex books, read James, it's good. And he's asking us to do something, because in the very next passage, says, so do not merely listen to the word. This sounds just like what Jesus was saying in the Sermon on the Mount. Don't merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Don't just go, oh yeah, I agree with that, and then go out and do nothing about it and deceive yourself. Think that you're doing something when you're really not. But do what it says. Anyone who listens to the word but does not do what it says is like someone who has a big zit on their face, looks in the mirror, and then doesn't do anything about it. Then the people who love you try to come along and pop it for you. You have people in your life who do that? Gross. That's not what it says, but you get the idea. It's the same principle. It's whoever looks at this in the mirror and then walks in and just forgets what they see, goes away and forgets what they look like. And then he says this, whoever looks intently into what? The perfect law that gives freedom. What do you think he's talking about here? He's talking about the message of the gospel and the kingdom. He's talking about bringing us to whoever begins to look at this and apply this and understand this and receive this and mostly trust in this, continues in it, not forgetting what they heard, they'll be blessed in what they do. So here's how I want to kind of finish. The peace that we are looking for is not, it's not a condition per se, it's a way. We tend to think that God gives us peace by giving us relief from whatever it is that we are feeling. And instead, the peace that God gives, and in fact, just what Jesus would say, he says, the peace that I give is not like the peace that the world gives. For in this world, you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world. There's something else that he's asking of us, to learn how to live in this rightly restored relationship and to be able to trust that, to trust it in yourself. I think the paraphrase of something that St. Augustine said was, love God and do what you want. You're like, that sounds great. Until you recognize or understand what happens to us when we love God, what kind of people we become when we love God. We think it's a way for us to get away with what we want. But instead, it's a way for us to actually be returned and restored to what you really want. Can you trust yourself? Can you trust when God shares something or says something or leads you? Can you trust in this way of life? You desire truth in our innermost being. And it is there in these hidden places that you've promised to make known wisdom. So here's how 2 things I want you to do in order to kind of find your footing. This is gonna take work, it's gonna take community. We're gonna talk more about this in the next few weeks, but I wanna leave you here. Number 1 is get honest. Get honest. You gotta be honest with yourself. You gotta be honest with your sin patterns. You gotta be honest with what you think about, all the different, you gotta be honest. And you gotta get honest with people around you, right? You gotta have people who are in there with you. And by that, what I mean is like, we'll craft arguments about positions or things that we wanna do or not do. We'll craft our arguments. And you've gotta be honest. Are you trying to really say, Lord, I want what you want. I want you to form me into the kind of person who can live right. Are you trying to justify the way of life that you already like or comfortable with? You have to do this on your own. But you have to get honest. What I've found is this provides me a place where I can truly consider sin, my own sin, the things that I wrestle with, the things that I struggle with. There are patterns and places where I am not only complicit in what happens, but I am deliberate. There are places where I've had to wrestle those things out for my heart and my desires to be formed. There are things, that's a whole other message. But what you begin to realize is that when you learn to be honest with God, to truly tell him and say him, it's an act of trust. You are trusting him enough to come clean. You are trusting him enough to expose all the things about you. And to find that there is no shame in that place, but somehow there's freedom. Why? Because his forgiveness is real. It's real and it's pervasive. We have been forgiven. We bring these things, we find that we have been forgiven. The challenge for us is how then do we learn to integrate that forgiveness, for that wisdom to become a part of us, for it to be integrated into the way in which we live our lives. And that's the challenge. Forgiveness doesn't mean you can do what you want. Forgiveness means that you now have to learn to live rightly related to God. And that's a thing we have to learn. Number 2, well, let me ask you these 2 questions first. Let me put those up on the screen. The first question is this: can you identify places where you are playing games or where you're just unwilling to admit things because you think that if you admit it, now you gotta deal with it? So there you go, happy Mother's Day. Number 2, because that's what my mom did to me. That's what she did to me. Because if she'd have said, no, you can't go, I could have blamed her for the rest of my life. You ruined my life because I didn't go to see Motley Crue. But instead she just said, you know where you're playing games. And it's gonna have effect in places that no one will see. And you can get away with it, and you can get what you want, but it's gonna do something to you that you don't want. Second question, can you identify places where you're hesitant to trust, or there are things that you just resist believing? If that's so, you're not alone. That's what we're trying to do here. Get honest. And number 2, determine the truth. Get to a place where you can put some things down and recognize that we have been justified. We have peace with him, and now we have access into this grace that serves as our foundation. This is the beginning point. But I'm telling you, if you learn to trust this, we will begin, I'm gonna say we will begin to experience a kind of freedom that you can start to give yourself. I think it's one of the great things about moms and mothers is just that constant giving of themselves. Moms, it feels like it never goes away. It's like you're always giving. We're grateful. But this is actually like a picture of how we are, right, to live. We need a source that makes us free enough to do that. Father, would you help us, guide us, call us to be honest, to bring ourselves before you? Would your grace and truth serve as a mirror, as a fire to purify, to test, to help us to see? Would your Spirit empower us and change us and form us as we learn to live in forgiveness, trusting that no matter what we have done, a way has been made for us to be right. And then to learn how to trust you and walk with you, to live as one who has been returned to this right relationship, who has been trusted again. So Father, I ask that you would do that, you would continue to teach us and guide us in this way, and that you would make known to us wisdom in the deepest places of our souls, to integrate us as a kind of whole person, free, unbelievable that you would do that for us, and it is unbelievably good. I ask all this in your Son Jesus, who is our King. Amen.